All right. Good morning, good afternoon. I cannot see the teleprompters. That's the hazard of being 6'5". This is an event where I am not worthy regularly comes to mind. Well, we've only got a short amount of time, so we'll start with this. John Muir once wrote, "Thousands of tired, nerve-shaken, over-civilized people are beginning to find out that going to the mountains is going home. That wilderness is a necessity, that mountain parks and reservations are useful not as fountains of timber and irrigating rivers, but as fountains of life." So on this panel, we shift our gaze to the mountains. We shift our perspective literally up 15,000 feet, or in the case of one of our panelists, more like 30,000. Today, I am pumped to hear from a diverse panel of leading voices who are dedicated to protecting our mountains from the impact of climate change, as well as the people, the way of life they support, and the industries they sustain. With that, welcome to the stage my good friend Phil Graves, Head of Corporate Development with Patagonia. My newest friend, Maura Olivos, the Director of Sustainability at the Alta ski area. She woke up in Alta this morning to join us today. And finally, our third panelist, Chris Davenport. Now, Chris, for those of you who know Chris, he needs no introduction in his natural habitat. I mean, like I said, we are not worthy. Honestly, I hold in such esteem all of the members of this panel, but I'm going to start with a question to Maura. To many, perhaps even Chris, Alta has the greatest snow on Earth. Anyone with me on that? Plentiful, abundant, light powder that is the stuff of legend. Will that continue to be the case in a warming planet? Has anything changed?
Maybe. You asked me to keep it short and sweet, so, but no. I can't predict the future, as I think the common thread has been said over and over again, but we are seeing change. That's the point of climate change, is you may be somewhere different. And we are known for our really light powder. You can't even make a snowball if you can imagine that. And we are starting to see some changes. We're not seeing these, we can't depend upon that light in your face powder every single year. And it's also supported by a lot of our climatologists and local atmospheric scientists that have been showing that we're probably going to see greater density in our snow, and that means heavier, wetter snow. So it's changing, but where we're going to end up, that's yet to be determined, and that's part of the bigger question when it comes to knowing your product and where we're going.
Interesting. So, Chris, you've skied all 54 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks in 1 year, mind you. Multiple first descents on virtually every continent on the planet. You've guided a ski trip to Mount Everest. But from that perspective, what changes have you observed? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Hopefully everybody's still awake this afternoon. That's why they put this panel in the afternoon. I think it's exciting. Having traveled the world, you guys saw some of the video stuff. There's two things that come to mind when it comes to like seeing change. One is physical, like being out there in the mountains and seeing glaciers that have receded, seeing shorter seasons, shorter winters. But I think more importantly, that travel has given me the opportunity to talk to people in communities, whether it's in South America or in the Alps or in Alaska, and because I'm not in those places all the time, I might not see that change, happening right in front of me. But you talk to people and they say, oh, you should have seen this place 30 years ago, or the glacier used to go all the way out to the bay, or the fishing season was 2 weeks longer. So I always try to talk to locals wherever I go, because they're the ones that really share those stories. Just like I live in Aspen, Colorado, and people come there, maybe it's in December, and they say, oh, there's not that much snow. And I said, it's true. We used to have a lot more snow even in November, but now the season's sort of shifting a little bit later. So you get a lot of information when you speak to local people and populations around the world in the mountains. But you can also go out there, as I've been able to do, and just see with your own eyes the fact that the glaciers are sinking and receding, and that snowfall is changed, as Maura alluded to. And it makes it very difficult to plan for your business when you don't know that the currency of our business is snow. And when you don't know if that's going to be there, what are you going to do? It's difficult to plan for.
So it's not just the volume of snow, it's the predictability of the snow. And actually the content of the snow is
Type of snow.
The type of snow, yeah, and timing of the snow. When's it going to come? When's it not going to be there? We talk about global warming and temperatures rising, but I think it's more like global weirding. Things are just trippy out there. It's really strange. Sea level rise. I mean, the planet is, when you kind of get the flu and you feel that fever coming on, I think that's what Mother Earth has going on right now. She's not feeling that good.
Fair enough. Phil, to the extent climate change poses a threat to the winter sports industry, I suppose it poses a threat to the Patagonia puffer jackets that we all own in our closets. But kidding aside, Patagonia's leadership in corporate sustainability is frankly an inspiration to me and perhaps many in this room. Can you share with us how Patagonia is responding to the threat posed by a warming planet?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In short, we're going all in for climate. The effects of climate change and global warming are undeniable. Here in SoCal, we're seeing things like catastrophic fires, flooding, mudslides, where a lot of our Patagonia colleagues couldn't even get to work. And for me personally, having a wife and 3 kids, having to evacuate in the middle of the night when the fire comes racing down the hillside and nearly burns our house to the ground. All these things are due to global warming and humanity's impact on the environment. So I'm really privileged to work for a place like Patagonia, where we recognize the severity of the climate crisis that we're in, and we are feverishly working on solutions. So I'll just highlight a few now. In no particular order, we've done things like sue the president for stealing our public lands. Woo! And as an outdoor apparel company, of course, protecting wild places where our gearheads, Patagonia customers can get out and enjoy it is critically important. But even digging in further on that issue, so if public lands aren't available, then you can't get out and use your Patagonia gear. And then when the control of public lands transfers from the federal government to states, we've seen that 70% of that land is sold off to the highest bidder. And oftentimes that's oil and gas extraction, and of course there's a direct correlation between those activities and global warming. So that's one of the areas. Another area is going all in for endorsing political candidates who protect the environment and stand for environmental causes. So for the first time in our history last year, in the midterm elections, we endorsed 2 candidates for US Senate. They both won in very close races, in part due to Patagonia's championing of them. We've launched Patagonia Action Works, which is a matchmaking site where grassroots and environmental nonprofits like Protect Our Winters can put out a need, and then it places volunteer hours directly with that organization, so people can volunteer their time, their talents to grassroots nonprofits. And those are just a couple illustrated examples of all the things that we're doing to climate. The last one I'll put a point on is we decided to give away the $10 million in savings that we had from the irresponsible Trump tax cuts to those exact environmental nonprofits.
Now, honestly, when we were preparing for the panel, I mean, one of the things that struck me was the breadth of the initiatives that Patagonia. Now, I understand Patagonia recently adopted a new mission statement. Can you tell us more about that?
We did, and candidly, it was very disruptive to my fellow Patagonians and me. We have a mission that everybody in the company knows, and made big decisions going back to the mission statement, which is truly unique. Changing that was, again, it was a really big deal. Our new mission statement is, we're in business to save our home planet.
All right.
Wow. Amazing.
And why that matters is because for us, it's time as a company to go beyond doing less harm. That was part of our old mission statement. And if we simply make a garment with the least amount of environmental harm possible and leave it at that, that's not going to change these intractable environmental problems that we face today. So we're seeking out regenerative solutions, things like regenerative organic agriculture and sequestering carbon in the soil through those practices. Those are all things that we're actively scouting out and pulling solutions to market in direct connection to our new mission statement.
Nice.
It's awesome.
Now, Maura, so Alta Ski Resort has been in existence for 80 years. The Alta Environment Center that you lead has been in existence for 10, and you've been there for 9 of them. How do you, from the mountaintop, what are your environmental programs, and how have they evolved, and what lessons have you learned about sustainability programming on the mountain during your tenure?
Well, from 8,500 feet to just over 11,000, we had a mission statement that kind of started the environmental center, and I want to say the Alta Ski Area has been around for 80 years, and it's this idea of conservation and utilizing our natural resources in a way that doesn't deplete them has been there since inception, and it's really part of Alta and all the employees and the skiers that are there. And so the Environmental Center was created just to kind of hone in on that, and that came with it a mission of sustainability. And it was defined to protect and improve the well-being of Alta's environment, ski industry, and community. And when I stepped in, it followed a triple bottom line philosophy, but when I stepped in, it wasn't really, the buy-in wasn't quite there. It wasn't, and I guess it was the understanding. And so one of the biggest goals for our company to really understand what does sustainability mean to us. And there is no single path to that. It's about understanding your brand, understanding your people, understanding your environment, and where do you go with that. And so it was our group, our employees, I forced them all into a room to talk to each other and to figure out what's important to us in the environment, what's important to us about the ski industry economically, and then as a community. And that's really always the biggest challenge is, again, sustainability cannot be the same for every single company or even family or person. And it's really important to try to figure that path out together. And especially if you're such a tight-knit group and family like Alta Ski Area. So, that presents challenges, but we've once you start identifying sustainability, then you start creating those bigger goals, like a reduction of your carbon footprint. But then how do you do that? Where does that come from? And so then it's working across all those lines, because I personally cannot get it done by myself. And that's really been the biggest side to this is not only do you have to understand what you're working with and who you're working with, but then you have to empower and motivate people as well. And that's where we're going, and that's where that's the biggest goal, is in order to hit a bigger thread, a global thread, or for this idea of sustainability to catch on across the industry, you have to identify that and empower everyone to want to do more and find things that they can do. And so I had to track all the stuff that goes on at Alta as far as every single initiative, and I can't keep up now.
Nice.
I'm banging on doors. Tell me what you did this year, because and that's the way it should be. I enjoy the fact that my coworkers, my friends, my family are starting to think in a different way. And, I would say we have a lot of goals around the reduction of our carbon footprint, but we still have a long ways to go on the empowerment side and thinking.
Speaking of empowerment, so you are a member of the board of Protect Our Winters.
Yes.
Do they have a mission statement?
We do. Protect Our Winters is a climate group that's trying to unite the greater outdoor industry. Could be skiing, snowboard, resorts, brands, bring everybody together to have one common voice for political change with climate change issues. We have found our biggest lever is not maybe local sustainable things like solar or wind, buying renewable energy. It's getting our elected officials to implement laws, legislation that's going to allow for more renewable energy, better transportation sector things. And so, POW is really trying to unite this big outdoor industry. I mean, it's 7.6 million jobs in the United States, generating some $800 billion in revenue, huge tax revenue for all of these states that have outdoor industry. And that industry never really had a voice. So Protect Our Winters, trying to bring together all of those people. And it's been a huge honor for me to work with that organization. I think back on my career as an athlete, won world championships and X Games medals and things like that. None of that it all pales in comparison to this work. This is so much more meaningful to me, being able to travel to Washington, D.C. and meet with senators and members of the House of Representatives. And prior to this administration, we were invited to the White House, sat down with former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy, who's speaking here tomorrow. You don't want to miss her talk. She's incredible. And representing our industry, the industry that Patagonia works in, the industry that Alta Resort is in. We're all together, and we need to fight for our future, or else we're not going to have one. And that's a lot of jobs and a lot of families and a lot of livelihoods and communities that will be impacted if we, as a group, don't stand up and fight. So my gloves are off. I'm ready to go.
Right?
Yeah.
Now think about it. These guys are doing first ascents. They're not being helicoptered in. They're actually mountaineering up. I had the privilege of joining Chris and the team at the POW Leadership Summit, where the first conversation I walked into, one of the members of POW, a woman said to another, "Hey, I haven't seen you since the Antarctica expedition last summer."
That stuff you see on the screen is not as scary as this work.
No kidding.
This is more meaningful.
But actually, the work that POW does is a really interesting conversation that I'd like to tee up for Phil, which is, there's a lifestyle of the ski industry that I think we all cherish. The lifelong ski bums talking about climate change seems like a disconnect. That is until you begin to learn about the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, who would probably consider ski bums like his people. Yet he found his voice, and he became reluctantly a corporate leader. How did Patagonia find its voice, and how does it strike the balance between being an outdoor retailer and an environmental activist?
Sure. Well, it's a great story how Patagonia was initially formed, and just to illustrate what Bob is saying, Yvon actually lived on cat food out of the back of his car at one point in his professional career. So Yvon was an itinerant climber, a surfer, backcountry skier, and he got into business to fuel his hobbies of being outside. And like many entrepreneurs, he thought he could do something better than what was currently done on the product side. And as a big wall climber in Yosemite, the industry standard was a piton, which is essentially a metal spike that you hammer into the rock face. And while it's effective, it leaves the rock less pristine for the climber behind you and then future generations of climbers to come. And Yvon was disheartened by that and made a bold move despite his little climbing business that he started by himself. He procured blacksmithing equipment at a junkyard and just taught himself how to blacksmith. Fast forward a couple years, he built the largest climbing business in North America. And he made a really bold move to switch from those pitons to reusable climbing hardware called chocks, which you wedge into existing cracks. They leave the rock in the same condition and just as pristine for future climbers as it is for you that day. So it was a bold risk. A venture capitalist may say you're foolish to take that kind of risk, but he wrote a clean climbing manifesto about why the company is switching and how it's important to leave places better than you found it. And that's really what spurred us to become an environmental company. So it's rooted in our company's history. Yvonne has made bold moves for the environments ever since. And talking to him about some of the history of things like switching to organic cotton and things that near term the CPAs wouldn't like because it may have a negative impact on profit. Yvonne will tell you that over time, over the course of our near 50-year history, anytime he's made a good decision for the environment, it's made him money. And that's what we go back to. Again, it's back to the mission statement. To your point, Bob, about how do we view being an activist versus being an outdoor retailer and somebody who makes and sells apparel. For us, it's inseparable. You use your voice, use every arrow in your quiver whenever you're fighting tooth and nail for environmental and social good. So we do that throughout our supply chain, going back to the materials side, using the best performing products with the least amount of environmental harm. We look to fair trade and other certifications that lift workers in our supply chain. And for us, everything we do is tied to the environment, including switching or leading the industry to switch locations for the big outdoor retailer trade show, in part due to the governor's stance on public lands, which was contrary to our stance. And because of that, we rallied the industry and we switched the location of it. So it's all tied together.
That's great.
Sorry, Maura, about
I actually never went to the OR show.
No, but I want to pause on that because we've got a room full of great communicators. We have a room full of strategists that think hard about communication. And personally, I think what Patagonia has done is really unique. But I actually want to ask that same question to Chris and Maura, which is, like, Alta has its voice. Like, how does Alta think about, and for that matter, POW has its voice. Like, how do you, what are the key messages and the key manners in which you deliver? You've got skiers that may not be easily taken seriously on issues of climate. And so I'm just sort of interested in hearing about that way in which participants in this industry can actually become advocates and do so successfulely.
Go ahead.
The previous question you were talking about, ski bums, it is difficult. It's a challenge, actually. It's not really difficult. It is a challenge to try to help skiers find their voice and become and understand their time within any organization, let's just say. So we have orientations at the beginning of each season. I go to all of our new employees and returning employees, and it goes all the way down to being able to do your job, and I don't, when we think, and people are like, what does this have to do with sustainability? But when I go to those folks, it is the social component is key. It's a really key part to getting where we want to go, which is sustainability. And when I go to them, I ask them, hey, you're here not just to be ski bums. Some of them really aren't. They want to learn how to ski better. They want to build their career skill sets. They want to build a career within the ski industry, which we need more people. We love that. And so I asked them, the first thing is just do this for yourself. Walk home at the end of the day and say you did the best you could. You may not be skiing where Chris is skiing, but you did the best that you could, and take that home with you. Everyone is a role model to a certain degree. And again, it goes back to that self-empowerment that you cannot separate business from advocacy, and you start where you can, and that is day to day, and everything that you do, from the work you do, how you what the work that you don't do, even just giving yourself time to relax and recoup. Maybe it's a walk outside, maybe it's a run, maybe it's meditating. I think everything that you have is a part of, you have to improve yourself if you're going and work on yourself if you're going to have any connection to everything else. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
That was good. I think, finding your voice is super important. I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but with Protect Our Winners, we like to try to tell passionate people like all of you in the room, you're here for a reason. You're passionate about this issue and what's happening in our world. So how do you turn that into a purpose? What can you guys do? I mentioned pulling that biggest lever that you have. Maybe you have a big social media following. Maybe you have a lot of money that you can channel in one direction or another. Like maybe you're a corporation like Patagonia, or maybe you're an individual like me and you go, gosh, I'm just one person. What can I do? You know what I like to do? What makes me feel really good is picking up the phone and calling my senator or the governor or writing a letter to them or posting on social media. And sometimes that's, like I said, it's a little scary. And that is, at the end of the day, I'm like, I did that today. That's our duty as citizens of the United States. We elect these people and send them up in government, but then we don't hold them accountable because they don't hear from us. So I would challenge all of you to write a letter or pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you guys doing about climate change? Not only is it the right thing to do, it will make you feel really good. So it's a good question, Bob. Thanks.
But better or almost as good as taking some of those turns that we saw.
Well, less risky, perhaps. I don't know. Physical risk.
Great. Well, we're going to go ahead and let these guys, in the words of John Muir, get back to the mountains and to get back home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks.